Hi everyone. Hi everyone. We're so happy to have you here in our last day of Inspiration Week. For us to get to know you a bit better, please comment your name and your where you from into the comment section. So we are going to read it through and we would get to know you a bit better. So, hello everyone, and welcome to day 5 and our final day of the Teens and AI Inspiration Week. I'm Mina Chemez, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Welcome to today's session of Inspiration Week, a key part of our International Women's Day campaign. This week is centered around International Day of Women and Girls in Science, reinforcing the urgent need to close the gender gap in STEM. Inspired by UNESCO's call to action, we are highlighting the crucial role of women in scientific innovation and tackling the importance of inclusive media representation to change stereotypes. By showcasing diverse role models and real opportunities in STEM, we aim to empower more young women and girls to see themselves as the scientists, engineers, and innovation of the future. First, a huge thank you to our incredible corporate partners, Sage Foundation, and Red Hat for their unwavering support and making this event possible. Throughout this impactful week, we've had the privilege of hearing from a diverse range of speakers, each delivering talks that have sparked inspiration and curiosity about vital subjects such as sustainability development goals, artificial intelligence, finance, equity, accessibility, and beyond. As we conclude this week-long journey, our focus shifts towards exploring career pathways within the fields of technology and AI. Kicking off our final session, we are honored to have Karina Chung, Neha Nataraj, and Victoria Lee. They're alumni joining us from Harvard and Lambert High School. The talk would focus on how to nonprofit organizations they co-founded called Bridge for Good originated from Teens and AI Hackathon. They will discuss the process of tuning our hackathon proposal into a nonprofit organization that generates real-world impact and the uniquely human factors we had to consider in making it happen. They will also discuss the potential of AI to help address some of the most pressing social issues of our time, drawing from experience working on machine learning for climate change related issues. If you have any questions, please add them to a Q&A chat, which we will come back to you at the end. Please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Karina, Neha, and Victoria.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to be here, super excited to have you all here. And today we'll be talking about how, as Mina said, thank you for the introduction, really appreciate it. We'll be talking about how we took an idea that we had to make this organization, Bridge for Good, and how we made that a real thing. But before we get started on that, we wanted to just introduce ourselves quickly. So I'm Karina. I'm one of the co-founders of Bridge for Good. I'm also a member of the Harvard class of 2026.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. I'm Victoria. I'm also a co-founder of Bridge for Good and also part of the Harvard class of 2026.
And I'm Neha. I'm a co-founder of Bridge for Good and Lambert High School class of 2025, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Awesome. So we're going to do a little bit of an interactive activity to kind of get our brains warm. So we have 2 prompts for this word cloud. So you can go ahead and grab your phones or use your laptops. Join us at menti.com and then use this code that's on the screen, 65698100. You can just type that in. And then we can move on to some of these questions. And so the first question that should show up is what comes to mind when you think of AI? So you can kind of put any words that come to mind there. And then the second question, how do you feel about starting a nonprofit? And so we can kind of go through these things together. So the code should stay up while I present. So here we go. Feel free to kind of enter the words as you can see them. We see things coming through: artificial intelligence, chatbot, NPC in a game. Interesting. Yeah, the future. It's great. We can keep them coming for a little longer. Yeah, I see ease and efficiency. Those are really key, kind of important things. When we think about technology, we think about things that make our lives easier and things that solve problems for others. And so we can continue to think about how we can bring kind of ease and efficiency to help other people. Awesome. These are all really amazing answers. Great. So I think now we can maybe move on to our second question, which is, let's see if it'll let me swap. How do you feel about starting a nonprofit? So what kind of comes to mind? Are you excited? Are you interested in what it might bring? Are you confused, like not really sure where to start? These are some examples, but any reaction is like totally welcome. Oh yeah, risky, a lot of work for sure. Not sure where to start, but awesome. So we got a mix of different emotions here, which is great. We'll keep them coming for a little while longer. Yeah, risky but worthwhile. I think that's a great one. Confused and excited. Oh yeah, funding. Where do you get the money? We'll talk about that later for sure. Awesome. I think these were a lot of the they summarize a lot of the emotions that Neha and Victoria and I had when we first started our nonprofit, Bridge for Good. We were kind of not quite sure where to start. We didn't know how much risk we wanted to take, uncertainty for sure. Like we didn't know what the future would hold. And it was definitely hard, and we needed a lot of help from other people to kind of get going. And so that's another theme we'll come back to. Great. Thank you all so much for your active participation. Really, really appreciate it. These were such great answers. So yeah, I think we'll kind of use that to segue into the rest of our conversation today. Right. Awesome. So here's just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. We'll kind of talk about what Bridge for Good is, kind of what our initial idea was, and then how it came to life in one of these Teens in AI hackathons, which I think you all will be participating in something similar over the next few weeks, which is very exciting. And then we'll talk about what happened after the hackathon. So how we took Bridge for Good from an idea to a real organization. We'll talk about what we're up to now. And then at the end, we'll leave a little bit of kind of open conversation about some of our other work in AI applications towards different social issues.
Yeah, hi everyone. So to get started, I'm first going to introduce what Bridge for Good is. So essentially, we participated in this hackathon during the global pandemic that we all experienced, and we were seeing this problem in the world, and we were really sort of interested in trying our best to help address it. So essentially, during COVID, there was a lot of crippling of these support systems for homeless individuals across the US. And essentially, these homeless shelters and these food banks, including the ones that we knew of and saw in our local communities, were running out of supplies. And at the same time, even though people really wanted to donate and wanted to help out, these people were not willing to venture out because they were concerned about transmission, and they just didn't know how to bring their kind of donations to these locations, and how to kind of bridge this gap between people who were willing to donate and this really large and increasingly growing to be larger need. So then, as a result, we created our platform, which basically is something that enabled these willing donors that I mentioned to make a donation to these shelters and these food banks. And one really key feature or aspect that we were thinking about is we didn't want to have these donors leave the comfort of their homes, and really sort of reduce the friction that kind of between deciding to make a donation and then seeing the actual sort of impact and the actual item that you were able to contribute to these shelters or these food banks. So some of the key features here were we basically did this through Amazon, where people could see very transparently where every dollar that they spent was going, because these purchases were made through this sort of Amazon-based platform. We also did sort of a machine learning-based donor shelter matching structure. I think while we were doing this, I saw that a lot of you in the what comes to mind when you think about AI prompt mentioned something like ChatGPT or chatbots, which kind of are encompassed by this language modeling, generative artificial intelligence. Maybe those are terms that are sort of related to this. And one thing that these kind of new technologies, which are around now but weren't around when we were thinking about the problem space and sort of the technical skills or the skills in general or the time and energy that we had, we didn't have access to tools like these. And something that they're really great at is sort of coding and explaining technical concepts. So then we think this sort of machine learning based tool is now maybe more accessible as something that you could learn maybe a little bit more quickly or be able to implement with the help of these tools. And essentially, we also, going to our third and last key feature, we also wanted to support these personal campaigns for people to raise supplies for shelters and really think about getting sort of local involvement and having people think about mobilizing the people around them. So then some of the implications of these features, like I mentioned, there is this purchase transparency aspect, you really knew where your money was going. And then because we kind of had this algorithmic and also kind of personal campaign based approach, there's maybe less inherent bias in the donor versus the needs distribution. And then part of the personal campaigns is we also were really interested, because we were youths at that time, and still, that we wanted to get youth involved to combat homelessness in America.
Yeah, so thanks, Victoria, for the intro and orientation to what Bridge for Good is. Now I'll be getting into sort of the thick of our talk, which is kind of how Bridge for Good originated and then how we ended up growing it. So we were a team of 5 girls, aged 13 to 16, when we started Bridge for Good. We met at the Teens in AI hackathon. So Victoria and I did know each other beforehand, but most of the team did not know each other at all beforehand. And so we met and proposed Bridge for Good during this Teens in AI Youth versus COVID hackathon in April 2020, which was an amazing event. During the hackathon, we were lucky enough to have amazing mentors and speaker sessions that really, really helped us kind of drill down on what idea did we have, what kind of problem do we want to solve, and how we could use technology like AI and machine learning solutions to actually address the problem. And so we, at the start, had a lot of help. So we had all of the Teens in AI speakers and mentors at the hackathon. And then we also, after the hackathon, earned mentorship from Microsoft Avanade. They were one of the sponsors of that Teens in AI hackathon. And because they liked our idea, they continued on with us afterwards. And so they were really, really instrumental in getting some of the technology up and running, having our website kind of out as fast as possible. And so we really owe a lot, I think, to all of the mentors and the help that we received from Teens in AI, for sure, for starting this thing. The first kind of mindset shift we had to adopt after the hackathon, because during the hackathon, you're trying to package a presentation that can be shown to judges, and you're scored on a specific kind of rubric. And I think the way the Teens in the AI hackathon was organized was the rubric was very much oriented to thinking about the kinds of questions that we wanted to think about in terms of what are the ethical considerations of deploying something like this? Is it actually going to solve the problem, right? And so during the hackathon, we kind of first started out by reaching out to lots of people and then seeing what they think. And that was a very valuable part of our sort of initial exploration. And all that happened during the hackathon. Afterwards, the first kind of mindset shift we had to adopt was to try and make decisions and do things as quickly as possible. Because especially during COVID, we were during the thick of the pandemic and people really needed help and time was sort of running out. And so we had to make decisions and pursue these partnerships to start serving people as fast as we could. And so that motivated our decision to work with Amazon, which Victoria talked about. And so because Amazon already has this existing like platform where you can make where shelters can make lists of things, items that they need, like the exact items, and then donors can order those off of the lists. Because Amazon already had like an initial kind of platform of this going, we just decided we would partner with them because that was the fastest way to bring impact to our network of shelters and food banks. That also was coupled with this sort of diligent outreach. So we had to reach out to at least 50 different shelters and food banks in order to develop this initial network of 10 partner orgs, which includes some from New York, some from Atlanta, Georgia, some from Missouri, and many others across the US. We started this work during the hackathon, as I described before, but a lot of it also happened afterwards. We were just kind of calling and emailing people. And I think in a lot of these social impact spaces, you'll find that people are really receptive to kind of working with you. Even if you're like a team of 5 people, you're kind of teenagers and are not 100% sure of what you're doing at that moment, people are very, very willing to work with you and willing to see kind of where a partnership might lead. And then we took this other step that doesn't seem like as interesting, but was definitely very important, which was legal incorporation. So what we did was we filed for status to be kind of an official legal entity in the summer of 2020. And the reason why this is significant is because if you're an official kind of legal entity in the US, donations to your organization are tax exempted. So that just means that people are more likely to donate to your nonprofit because they don't have to pay taxes on their donations. So that was another kind of avenue through which we were able to get more funding and more donations through that because people didn't have to, there were less barriers for people to donate. And then we kind of wanted to make sure, as I said before, with the speed that we were getting things out and on the ground as fast as possible. And so in the first 2 years, we facilitated over $10,000 worth in donations, and we helped 20 shelters in campaigns. And we were really excited by this, but we also wanted to see if we could make Bridge for Good into something bigger. We were really excited by the initial progress that we made in kind of partnering with these organizations and helping out homeless folks. And we wanted to bring that sort of empowerment to individuals across the country. And so we opened up some new features that allowed student-run campaigns to raise donations for charities and volunteer organizations in their communities that they cared about. Because we had some people actually asking us like, hey, can I do this? And the amazing thing about starting your own organization is that it is truly up to you, right? And so you have the agency to shape the mission of and the direction of where your organization is going to go. And if someone comes up to you and has a great idea, you can help them make it happen. So that was kind of the motivation for our student-run campaigns. And then in order to also help us with a lot of the work that we were doing, we added a group of volunteers as well as a volunteer coordinator to our team. So our team became like 15 from 5. And that was really, really helpful, because we definitely, as some people alluded to before when we were doing the word cloud, it is quite a lot of work, and it's definitely the amount of work that you can do scales with the number of people that you have, right? And so having more people helped us kind of accomplish more of our goals. And then we also wanted to kind of give back to the community where this all started, which was sort of teens and AI and this interest space of people who, young people who are interested in technology, in AI and machine learning. And so we facilitated a series of free intro workshops to expand youth access to technological literacy, to introduce them to AI and machine learning. And so this was also kind of part of the ideas that like we wanted to do. And so Bridge for Good became kind of beyond just our initial idea that we proposed at the hackathon. We also were able to kind of expand and grow it in a variety of ways.
All right, thank you, Karina. So I'm going to talk about what this looks like now, 4 years down the line. So we've started a bunch of chapters across the US ran by individual youth-led initiatives. When you give these students that opportunity, it's amazing to see the millions of different things that they do with it. In partnership with Emory KSAP, we've held medical screening events that have provided essential healthcare access to those in Atlanta, and our platform continues to enable teens to create this meaningful change in their local communities. So I'm going to show you some of the events we're working on right now. All right, so we spoke at an environmental conference, I think last February, which was incredibly cool because our initial mission was just AI and social good and healthcare, and it spread into varied interests by these individual social youth groups. And then we've held meetings and hackathons and workshops, introducing kids to AI, introducing kids to social good, and showing them that the impact that they can have individually. So our biggest event would be this Emory screening that we got news coverage for, and we were able to talk to Bridge for Good and partner with Emory doctors and students to hold a large medical screening that helped 200 in February gain access to healthcare, medical supplies, winter supplies, clothing, and warm showers.
So now we're going to transition into some of the AI-related projects that we've done outside of Bridge for Good. And we're happy to answer questions after this section, which is our last section, either on Bridge for Good, any of these application areas, or just like happy to talk very openly about our experiences. So in particular, some of the AI-related projects we've done within kind of like the broad umbrella of social impact has included also like climate change and environmental issues, kind of like in healthcare, particularly in disability accommodations, as well as in like sort of biology research. So I'm going to start with a project that I did within the biology research space. So it gets like a little bit technical. I'm happy to delve into more details. But essentially, I don't know whether you guys have heard of this technology called CRISPR. Essentially, it's like a gene editing technology. So basically, everything in the human body, in animals, and anything that's living, essentially, mostly is like based on DNA, which then becomes protein, and then that carries out all of the functions that we have like every day in our body that lets us have our like to be alive, essentially. And then basically in the 2020, I think, Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to people who discovered CRISPR, which is something that acts like a pair of molecular scissors and is able to cut the DNA. It's able to edit the DNA, essentially. And then since these genes are kind of like the basis of biological function, it also plays a really important role in both studying and some treatments for diseases, including like certain types of cancers, certain types of genetic diseases. So essentially in this project, I made a machine learning model that goes from these target DNA sequences. Basically, we can cut them using CRISPR, but where should we target with this new technology? If we have a gene we're interested in targeting, for instance, for some cancer therapeutic, where should we cut along that gene? This is kind of a like sort of unclear question, and we thought that AI or like machine learning tools might be able to help. So I took this DNA and then I predicted essentially the editing outcomes from this sort of like new tool that scientists were able to add to kind of their toolkit for combating such kind of like diseases or disorders. And I used like these two techniques that are listed here that I'm happy to talk about. But essentially, this is kind of the workflow of this one project that I did. And then after I made this machine learning model, I was like, maybe it's a good idea to try to make the kind of results and predictions of this model more accessible and available for everyone to see. So then one thing that you might want to think about, which is also, I think, like the theme of our talk, I guess, today, is thinking about having an idea and then bringing it to reality, bringing it to sort of real world impact. So after I had built this tool, I was like, how can I make sure that people can access this? Like kind of like running a machine learning model and doing all this like setup can be a little bit like there's more of a barrier or like activation to be able to do something like that. So then I thought like, why don't I make a database where I say like, here are all of the potential places that you could cut along this particular gene or like sequence of DNA that you're interested in cutting. So then let's predict for every location along. What does my tool say? What do we recommend? So also thinking about the deployment aspect of it and making sure that people actually have access to kind of the work that I've done or we've done and developed.
Awesome. Thanks, Victoria. I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that I did related to the impacts of climate change, and a similar theme to Victoria's project in that the research and the AI technology and the machine learning models can really make a difference in kind of making progress towards answering research questions. But I think it's only really worthwhile if you do end up putting that research in practice. So I'll talk a little bit more about that component later. And so these machine learning systems are really useful for climate change applications because oftentimes when we try to study climate change, it becomes very difficult because the Earth is very complicated, right? The Earth is like a big system. There's a lot going on. And the great thing about these AI and machine learning systems is that they can take in tons of different data from tons of different sources. And so in the climate space in particular, we use a lot of satellite imaging. So these are like, these cool satellites that fly around the Earth every 3 or 4 days or every week or so. They'll come over the same place again, so you get images that kind of cross space and time. And then within these satellite images, you can also look at patterns about the weather. You can get a sense of like how the crops are doing in a specific place, and so you can get data on food supply and also weather patterns from those images. And then we also kind of incorporate data from sensors on the ground. And so like weather sensors and temperature sensors and things like that also come into play here. And so we take all that complex data, we put it in a machine learning model, and then we can forecast a lot of very interesting things. And what this project focused on specifically was forecasting acute undernutrition and food insecurity in Guatemala. And so the reason why climate change is related to these undernutrition numbers is that often in Guatemala, how much food exists depends on the climate, and it depends on whether the crops are able to grow. And so in a given year, you can use these climate factors to help predict undernutrition. And we did this in partnership with the Guatemalan government. So as I said before, we didn't feel like just doing the research was enough, right? And so we collaborated directly with the Guatemalan Secretariat of Food Security and Nutrition. They are in charge of making sure that everyone in Guatemala has enough to eat. And so we partnered directly with them to make our forecasts available to them so they can kind of use it in practice to inform their decisions. So this is a dashboard that I coded that has a more updated version of the forecast you can see on the right. Guatemala is separated into 20 or so different regions or states. And so you can see there's a different forecast of the amount of undernutrition that we project for each state using our model. And then we also had to kind of make sure that we were working directly with the Secretariat government officials to address their needs. And so we had meetings with them to kind of talk through what our model exactly was doing, and then also talk through kind of how to interpret the forecasts for their decision making.
All right, thank you, Karina. I'm going to talk about this project I did for disability accommodations. So first of all, here was my idea. We have glasses, right? But for blind people, glasses aren't very useful because there's no way for them to see what's going on around them. So we were going to use semantic segmentation to auditorily say what was around them. And this is a thing already. I'm showing you a model that exists, but look at the price tag on that. That's $2,499. That's $2,500, which is inaccessible for people living in the US. So you have to think about how that affects people in third world countries where this is probably like a full year of salary for them. And for those who can afford a $2,500 disability accommodation, this isn't a huge deal because they have private schools and they have other accessible resources to figure out what's going on around them. I was talking to this man at the Karina Vidya Foundation, and I found that reading bus signals, just not being able to tell where bus routes are going, has like completely crippled his life because there's no way for him to get anywhere. So can you go to the next slide, Karina? All right, so here was my way to create that device for around under $10, $20. So first I took this Raspberry Pi and a little camera auditory sensor, which is very cheap and accessible for all of you. In fact, to show that you don't need some fancy technology or a lab to be able to do projects that make a significant difference. And then we took that signal input to Kinesis video streams, which I'm showing on the right, where you have this media data being entered and then separated into a ton of images. And then we use computer vision to say, hey, there's this image. We're going to look at it and figure out what's in that image and then repeat it. And on the left is this blind professor testing out that device and giving me feedback. And so I've been able to work with the Karina Vidya Foundation and this professor to take that project and hopefully implement it. All right, so thank you so much for listening to all of us. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, thank you, Karina, Neha, and Victoria for your presentation. Thank you so much for your insights and experiences. Now we invite the audience to ask questions. Please add your questions to the Q&A chat where we will answer them. How did you have the idea of creating a nonprofit organization, and what sources would you suggest for our participants who are considering the same path as yours?
Yeah, I guess I can start with this one. We kind of made the decision during the Teens in AI hackathon when we were thinking about what problems we wanted to address. And this was like the inspiration for this came from our local communities. Like we saw this happening in shelters that were near to our homes. And so that was a real problem that we could go talk to people about and ask people what they needed. And once we found out that kind of the scale of this problem was much larger than sort of us just going to the 2 shelters nearby and helping out, we are sort of a team from across America, and that really helped us figure out that this problem was happening everywhere and not just kind of where we were able to see it. in our neighborhoods. And so that kind of gave us the idea that we needed an actual organization to pursue kind of the solutions that we wanted to pursue, as opposed to kind of just taking individual action, if that makes sense. And to your second question about sources for people who are thinking of pursuing the same path, I think it would be, I think that's a great question. One of the things that I would say immediately is to talk to the people around you that are being affected by the problem, right? So as many people as you can find in your local community, or like you could call different what we did was just call and email different shelters nearby. Doing that and really just talking to people and seeing where exactly their like the problem is, that is, I think, the first kind of litmus test or kind of experiment almost that you could conduct to see whether it's appropriate to start an initiative. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. And so you mentioned that the team was between 13 and 16-year-old girls, your old version of yourself. So what would be your suggestion for young girls like your team when you had your first start at Bridge for Good, based on your personal experiences? What would you suggest them to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I can take this. Victoria, Neha, if you have thoughts, also jump in. I think from my personal experience, one of the biggest barriers to kind of success for me as a woman was like doubting myself. I think I almost felt like it wasn't my place to address this problem, just because like maybe like because it wasn't necessarily a problem that I had personally faced. Like I didn't know, I almost felt like I didn't know enough, or that I wasn't powerful enough almost. But I think the key realization here is that you actually don't need to be that powerful, right? Like impact usually starts within kind of your own community, within the people just around you, and it grows naturally with the team members that you end up building and developing, and the connections that you end up kind of fostering over time. And I think, like, especially in the Bridge for Good case, like we had to do a lot of kind of team bonding almost, because we had never met before we ended up starting this thing. And that was a really, I think, valuable experience for us to all lean on each other, right? Because I think we were a team of 5 girls, so all female, and I think we really were able to use that to our advantage somewhat, that we were able to relate to one another's struggles, and we were also able to kind of bring this to other women and girls who were interested in doing similar things. So this, I think, is the most important point here, is that like you don't need to feel totally prepared or totally kind of powerful in order to do something like this.
Thank you so
I'd like
much
to add
for
on
your,
to that, if that's okay.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I was 13 when we were starting this. I mean, that was like the end of middle school for me, and obviously I had no technical skills, no networking skills. I had no idea how to do it. So for the younger students here looking to get started, I would just say do it. Just dive in head first. I think when I first heard the term artificial intelligence, I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I went on Udemy and I just spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure that out. And all these small steps that I took, I mean, if you take a 13-year-old and put them in front of an artificial intelligence course that's full of linear algebra, obviously you understand nothing. But you keep taking those steps and you'll see really, really big results like we are right now.
Thank you for your powerful response. I'll move forward with the next question. How can we maintain learning new skills related to AI along with our own study burden in any other field being a student?
I think projects are the biggest way to do that. Like take on things like this. You can and take on things within school, because I found that my school assignments also can be loosely applied to AI. And if there is that chance to practice my technical abilities, I love to do that. So I just do projects wherever you can. You see this idea, it might be like outrageous and completely impossible, but there are so many tools you have now. Like we were talking about earlier, we didn't have ChatGPT when we were starting this. We didn't have any of the AI tools you have now. You have all of these tools in front of you, so just dive into it, create projects, and it doesn't have to be like a huge thing outside of your school curriculum. As long as you're thinking about it and actively trying to learn, you will definitely learn.
Thank you, Neha, for your answer. Does Bridge for Good only work? What do you think that is the future of Bridge for Good?
I think our youth initiatives are huge right now. We have so many individual chapters, and honestly, I have no idea exactly where Bridge for Good will be sitting 5 years from now. But now we have youth taking these own initiatives to create changes in our community. And so I envision Bridge for Good becoming an even bigger social movement than before, with our chapters and affiliates and sponsors continuing this effort along with us.
Thank you for your answer. What was your first attempt to gain funding for your organization, and how successful was it?
Yeah, I guess I can jump in on this one. The first kind of big initiative we did, honestly, it was friends and family, right? So we reached out to the people closest to us. We said, hey, we're working on this thing. It's very important to us. We'd love for you to kind of contribute. And those donations were not to Bridge for Good as an organization as much as they were just donations that went directly to our partner shelters. And so I think the way that Bridge for Good was organized as kind of this like intermediary almost between shelters and donors, I think it helped us not have to look for as much funding for the organization itself, just because what we really wanted was the funding to get to our partner shelters. And so there's kind of two like components to this. One is funding to kind of keep up the Bridge for Good organization itself. And so that we did gain through some grants that were very generously given to us by a few different sources. And that was really, really helpful to kind of get us started in terms of our own expenses. But Bridge for Good was kind of not that expensive in operation. And so it was most of the kind of funding that we really wanted to facilitate was to these partners. And I would say like the donations we facilitated through, friends and family, that kind of uptake is fairly successful. But then once we started trying to move beyond friends and family, that's where it got pretty challenging, right? And so we thought a lot about like doing, like how would we approach this? And so we kind of did some more social media, we were more active on social media. We did some campaigning there. We also kind of had our friends and family kind of disperse the idea out to their sort of friends until it sort of became something that a lot of people, even people we didn't know necessarily, like ended up knowing about it. And I think that's in a lot of ways how a lot of these initiatives start, right? It's sort of you kind of grow outward from the people who you know.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karina. We
Yeah,
have
I
to move
wanted,
on with, yeah, of course.
oh,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
wanted
of
to add
course,
on one
Priscilla.
small point, which is just like we allow for people to do these sorts of personal campaigns, and we found that allowing kind of like youth to feel empowered to start their own sort of initiatives and also very kind of like local community based like Neha described last year, how she did an initiative in Georgia that got kind of like even local media and news involved. So just thinking about having localization to find networks in local communities as ways to kind of like get also like local kind of people really aware of the initiatives you're doing as a really powerful and maybe more distributed way to get the word out, to raise funding, stuff like this. Yeah, thanks everyone for your time and for listening.
Thank you so much for you all to join us for today, but we have to end our Q&A session right now and move on to our next speaker. But we're so grateful for your participants, and we're so grateful for the presentation, all the insights that you've provided for us all. Thank you. It's now my privilege to introduce our next speaker. We're honored to have Tory Frame with us. Tory is a doctoral student in Bath University's AI CDT. If you have any questions for Tory, please add them to the Q&A chat, which we will come back to at the end. Thank you so much for being here today, Tory. The floor is yours. Tory, you're on the mute. If you can, please. Hi, Tory. Sorry, you're still on the mute. If you can still check that for us, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it sounds perfect. Thank you.
Great. And I'm just going to share my screen. So, hello, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about Sleep Angel, which is the sleep improvement system that I developed during my PhD. And for those of you who are into buzzwords in AI at the moment, it is multi-agentic, which we can get into. But before we start, I thought I would share with you a little bit about why I did this. So the most important thing here is that sleep really matters for our health and our wellness. I'm not sure whether many of you are into sleep, but for instance, not getting enough sleep when you get older is associated with an awful lot of diseases. And it's also associated with workplace accidents. For instance, you're 1.8 times more likely to have an accident if you haven't slept well the night before. And also your cognitive ability goes down if you haven't had enough sleep. So it's a really big deal. And each of our behaviors in our environment drive how long and how well we sleep, but everyone's sensitivity is different. So I'm going to share with you a bit of that, like when your parents are on your case telling you to turn off your screen at night, I've got some useful information for you to use with them. And my sleep improvement system figures out for each person what behaviors and environment matters. They get a personalized recommendation and it helps them change their behaviors in the environment. And the best thing is, from my perspective, is it actually works. It improves people's sleep and their slow wave sleep. And I've got some cool stuff on trust. I understand that you guys are not just into the technical side of AI, but also the ethical side, which I'm very passionate about. And if you are yourselves going to be building decision or behavior support systems, I've got some cool tools that you could use too to make sure you're building trust with your users. So with that, here's a bit more on my motivation for doing this. As you can see on the left-hand side, this is someone who's not sleeping well. If you sleep less than 7 hours a night, there will be, over time, particularly when you get older, a health and wellness impact. And if you're not a chronic insomniac, and chronic insomnia is a mental health challenge, the main treatment that you're going to be offered by the doctor is something called sleep hygiene. And that may be something that you've heard from your parents, like, get up and go to bed at the same time every day, don't drink coffee too late, avoid light in the evening. Now, the problem is that although they do actually have some impact in trials, all the trials so far have been subjective. So it's basically someone says that they sleep better, but actually in real life, only about 47% of the time is there a correlation between what someone says about their sleep, when you objectively measure it, what was going on. And there's also limited personalization, although everyone's very different in terms of their sensitivity. And then the other really cool thing about sleep is there's a particular type of sleep called deep sleep, which you get in the first half of your night. And that is amazing. It clears your brain of plaques, which are negative for your for basically things like Alzheimer's disease. It's all things that matter when you're later. But interestingly enough, there's been really no research whatsoever as to whether sleep hygiene can improve slow wave sleep. So lots of opportunity to use objective data. Now, if I was to give you a quiz on what all the things are to do to sleep better, you guys would probably get, I'm sure, at least 50%. That's what most people get whenever I go through this with them. But at a very basic level, these are all the things you could do to sleep better. So during the day, you should be getting exercise, you shouldn't nap, you shouldn't drink caffeine, you should eat early, you should get loads of natural light. You should relax in the evening. So about 2 hours before you go to bed, you should be avoiding evening light, relaxing, not having a lot of liquids before you sleep, and not, smoking or taking other drugs. When you go to sleep, you should be retiring to what I would call a sleep sanctuary. It should be cool, dark, and quiet. And you shouldn't be having things like electronic devices or computers in your room, because that can remind you of things when you should be sleeping. And you should be in bed long enough to sleep and a consistent arise time and bedtime. Now, no one person can do 16 things. And the really cool thing is individual sensitivity differs. I said I was going to share with you something that you might find useful with your parents, because the average person, when you give them like candles and you check whether their sleep is delayed or not, well, the minimum, the most sensitive person relaxed to 10 candles worth, which is what's on the left-hand side. And the most, the least sensitive reacts to 480 candles worth. And I can guarantee you, if you're in the UK today and you stood outside at midday, you wouldn't get that much. So if you're like someone on the right-hand side, there's no need whatsoever to be avoiding evening light, versus on the left-hand side, you absolutely should. And there's no way right now that you guys can know, this is what your parents will say, is you don't know if you're on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. And if you're having trouble sleeping at night, it could well be that it would be a good idea to avoid light, and you've no idea of knowing. So that's what my sleep improvement system did. It measures your sleep and what drives it. So for instance, if a lot of light in the evening leads to less sleep, and it tailors personalized recommendations to help you sleep more and or deeper. And that's the explanation I gave my mother as to what I was doing. I always think that when you come up with technical solutions, it's a good idea to make sure that your mom would be into it. I'm going to give you now the more technical version, because I understand that you are some aspiring technologists out there. This is the technical version. So our system measures sleep and 16 sleep hygiene, behavioral, environmental factors. We did that over 2 months. We used smart devices and user digital inputs for things that we couldn't measure with a smart device, like the last time someone had a coffee and how much. We got AI agents to use this to create a personalized recommendation. And the user receives this through a digital interface along with their baseline report. That's basically what happened over the 2 months. And then over 1 month intervention, their daily tracker, which helps them implement the interventions they choose. So of that list of 16, they choose a maximum 3. So getting a bit more technical, we did our data collection through smart devices. Our users validated it. They checked it and they said, yep, I think that's right. I was outside in the middle of the day. So that spike, for instance, in my natural light is correct. So they built trust with the data, and we only put the data they trusted into the AI agents. And I used a combination of machine learning. So for those of you who are into this stuff, I did both regressions and classifications. And I tested about 42 regressions, in fact, to come up with the best one for each person, as well as a rules-based agent, which took what the expectations for doctors are and applied them. So an example there is something like caffeine. You're not supposed to have over 230 milligrams of caffeine per day, the average person. So if someone was having more than that, it flagged it as an issue. We put those two things together, the ML recommendations and the rules-based recommendations, into a recommendation for the user. And they got to choose 3 things from that and put them into action, which we tracked with smart devices. So the headline is these are some of the devices we used. The first one is Dream, this funky device this guy's wearing on his head, measures total sleep time and slow wave sleep. It's super sophisticated. It's an EEG device for those of you who are interested, and it measures your brain waves and it classifies it into what type of sleep, so like deep sleep or light or wake. The Aura Ring, for those of you who are into these things, I've got one here. It's great for naps, for cardio and relaxation. You guys should never use it to measure sleep because it does it incredibly poorly. Like for instance, for an adult, it's only correct 40% of the time when the person's awake. So it's very poor on sleep overall, but it does pick up naps. This is me modeling on my glasses, LIS, which is how you would be able to tell how much light you got in the evening if you had that. So you could tell on your individual sensitivity whether you were 10 candles or 480. And this is Sleep Angel, which is a device I built myself. You'll see there that there's a little Arduino device with some 3D printed wings to make it a little bit more endearing to sit on your bedside table. And it measures whether it's dark, cool, and quiet. And it only measures it when you're asleep. So whatever else you're doing in your bedroom, it's not picking up any of that stuff. And it keeps it totally private. So it calculates everything on the device itself. And although it's got like a microphone to measure decibels, it only sends the actual decibel numbers to me. It doesn't send me what you said. So very private. Those are our devices. And then this is just an example for the regression. Luckily, I got my number right. It was 42 algorithms we trialed for each participant. And those of you who have done regressions before, you'll know that you specify a target variable. Mine was total sleep time or slow wave sleep. And then I got the Dream headband to give me that. And then those 16 practices I talked about earlier, I took those, I measured them with the devices I've shown you. So the Dream, the Aura, the LIS, and Sleep Angel. And then for those ones down at the bottom, that was the one I was saying, I did the daily digital survey. So the caffeine was an example. And those were my feature inputs. And those all fed in. And I used supervised machine learning and neural networks to assess what people were most sensitive to. And then this is, for my supervisors, they get very excited by this kind of thing. This is on the left-hand side is showing the mean difference in terms of minutes it had. So for instance, the average person over the whole of the intervention slept an extra 24 minutes, which is very material. And the red dotted line beneath it, which is about 15 minutes, is what the doctors need when they do trials. That's a significant improvement in sleep. So I had almost double that. And then on the right-hand side, I tend to like to look at slow wave sleep and REM as percentages increases, because obviously they're smaller than the total sleep time. You can see there that, for instance, slow wave sleep increased by up to 31%. So super big improvements in terms of sleep. So super exciting. And for me, the motivation is I'm very excited to help people get better health and wellness outcomes and also avoid Alzheimer's, which is what retarding slow wave sleep should do. And it does require more research, but the good news is we've got something here now that actually works and can be tested. I thought you might want to see some of the stuff that I did. People got personalized little packs. You can see there that Louise is in the left and Joss is in the middle. And you've seen that angel before, but it's dressed as an angel. and it's meant to be endearing on the bedside table, but also I made the sensors visible so it was transparent what it was, and I explained it to people. And some of the things that you want to do if you want to build trust in AI is one is physical embodiment. So that's an example of the angel. That's, you can see what it is where the AI sits. And then the immediacy behaviors is personalization. So these boxes are personalized, but also the reports people got were personalized with exactly their data that they tested. So they really built trust in the data that they were using. We've got 3 new metrics to measure trust. And this is what I was saying would be interesting for you guys if you wanted to build a recommender system like this. And I'll bring alive some of what we did to do it. They are called Dirty, Dafty, and Dotty. And you can see that I got some generative AI help in generating these, but I think it did rather well. So the first one is Dirty. And in that one, when you're wanting to understand trust, the first thing is, in terms of demonstrated trust, is did they say they would do something? So for instance, on the right-hand side, they were given this matrix and they were choosing up to 3 things on this. And anything in the top right was ranked really highly based both on the rules-based system and the machine learning system. But some of them tended to rely more on what the rules-based approach was, what a sleep expert would choose, so choosing things over here in the top left, and others would depend a lot more on what the machine learning was doing. So that was basically what we used to measure whether people were relying more on the machine learning or more on the rules-based approach. The next thing we looked at was demonstrated trust, but here in terms of follow through. So did I take action and do it? So not just did I do it, did I say I was going to do it, like, yes, mom, I'm going to do my homework, but actually I did my homework. And what I felt so exciting, like on the right-hand side, this is for all of the interventions that people chose. So for instance, let's choose one, let's choose caffeine. So participant D chose caffeine. And when you compare for the month that they did the intervention, how well they did relative to baseline. If it's blue, they did well. If it's red, they did bad. You can see that this person literally cut their caffeine consumption by about 70%. So huge impacts, actually. Like they really did what they said they were going to do, except for a few here on the left-hand side. And what we do then is we look at, do people follow through on the things that machine learning recommends relative to do they follow through on things that the rules-based system recommends, just to get a bit of sense about like how much trust they're demonstrating in their recommendations. And last but not least is, was I right to trust? So did the model tell me something that made a difference? Now, you guys saw the total sleep time statistics I had before for the population, but I thought you might be interested here just to see for a person. This person on the left-hand side, they've got their baseline and each dot is a night. You can see they average just less than 6 hours a night, which is, really not good. That person will be having trouble remembering things during the day. They could absolutely be having accidents. It's really important that they get up above 7 hours. And then the other dots all along the way, those are the distributions. So sometimes they got 9 hours when they got enough time in bed, but average of 6. And then on the right-hand side, you can see during the intervention just how much more tight the sleep was. And they managed to move it up to about 6.5 hours on average. So that is really quite a big change over a month. And the idea would be that that person would continue to do those activities and hopefully over the next month or two, get over 7. So there you are. That is a whistle-stop tour of my research. And I would love to take any questions. I hope that wasn't too fast and it made sense.
It sounded all lovely, Tory. Thank you for being with us today here. Now we're gonna answer our questions from our participants and move to our Q&A. Please write your questions to the Q&A section so Tory can answer it for you. First, I would like to ask you, you mentioned Sleep Angel project. Am I correct?
Yes.
Can I ask you the relationship where the Alzheimer's case what kind of impact that Sleep Angel could have in cases like Alzheimer's?
Yes. So, get this, it's completely mad. When you're in deep sleep, your brain passageways open up 60%, and then fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, washes in, flushes around, and then washes away these beta amyloid plaques. And these beta amyloid plaques, whenever you cut open someone's brain who's got Alzheimer's, that's what's clogged them up. So the idea is that if you can get someone's slow wave sleep up to an appropriate level, and for people who are between 40 and 55, that's between 1 hour and 1.5 hours. So if you get their passageways open for that period, then they can, by natural means, by their using their own biorhythms, retard, maybe even forever, Alzheimer's, because they'll be washing away the beta amyloid plaques themselves. And research now, so we now know how to increase slow wave sleep, because as you saw there, by individually selecting for each person what will drive their slow wave sleep, they can implement it and we can increase it. And now we need to have research into the impact on beta amyloid plaques, but that will require an invasive test, and that's the next step.
Thank you so much for your answer. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to have one more question from our audience to ask you. What was the inspiration behind Sleep Angel is one of the questions to follow up.
The inspiration was actually my mother. My mother doesn't sleep well. Every time I call her, she's like, oh, I slept so badly. And I got really annoyed that why wasn't she not doing something about it? Why not fix it? So I took her to like a spa type place where it was like a medical thing and they like taught her what to do. And interestingly, I was just like, she's never going to do it. Like, it's like these 16 crazy things. Like, and I love the mental and the physical and the fact that each person is individual. And I thought I did loads of reading and academic research to understand whether I could like help my mum, like, tell her what it is she's supposed to do. It was absolutely impossible because there's just too many things and I didn't know which one would actually help her. So that was what inspired me to build it. And I'm sure you're going to ask me, is she sleeping better now? Yes, she is, but she still complains about other things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tory. It's so relatable for you to come up with this idea based on your mom's experiences. So thank you so much for your presentation and your speech. We're so happy to have you here with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you all.
As we draw to the curtains on what has been truly been an extraordinary week filled with inspiration, learning, and thought-provoking discussions, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who have been a part of this journey. I want to express our deepest appreciation to all our esteemed speakers who have generously shared their insights, expertise, and passion with us. Your contributions have been invaluable in shaping this experience and inspiring us to dream bigger, aim higher, and strive for positive change. And to our dedicated audience, thank you for your active participation, engagement, and enthusiasm through the week. Your presence has been the driving force behind the success of this event, and we're immensely grateful for your continued support. Last but not least, I would like to thank Sage Foundation and Red Hat for their support as our sponsors for this event. Thank you once again. Until we meet again, stay inspired, stay curious, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Goodbye and take care, everyone.